What if your pain wasn't physical? What if your ache in your back, the anxiety in your chest, the weight you carry was your subconscious trying to speak? What if your body remembers everything your mind forgot? And what if healing wasn't found in another prescription, but in remembering who you truly are? What if trauma didn't have to be your life sentence? What if freedom was already within you, waiting to be unlocked? Every week on The Subconscious Healer, we ask questions most people are too afraid to face and reveal the answers your soul has been waiting for. Join us as we take you beneath the surface, into the nervous system, the subconscious, and the unseen patterns shaping your life. Because healing doesn't happen from the outside in. It happens when you remember the truth of who you are. The Subconscious Healer, you're not broken, you're just ready.
Hi, Robbin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Great to see you today.
Great to
Um,
see you.
Thank you for joining me on the Subconscious Healer podcast. Um,
Thank
I'm
you for
glad you
inviting.
I'm glad you're here. I've always enjoyed our conversations in the past.
As have I.
So, you've done some incredible work on educating people, helping people detoxify, um, bring into light the the facade of the not only the pharmaceuticals but also amongst my own colleagues in functional medicine and things like that, which I will say is necessary. Um, you've done some incredible work on educating people and showing people the role on how to get back to natural health. Okay. I think it's an appropriate first question to kind of see, just kind of start out. We'll just go where we go, but I would like to know, what role do you believe that our higher mind, our subconscious mind, um, plays in the role of healing and transformation?
Well, that's a great question. That's a heavy question because it really has to encompass what's the cause of the issue. So I believe, let's say you've been poisoned systematically, periodically with cyanide. No matter what your unconscious beliefs, eventually the poison is going to catch up to you. But when we're talking about healing, like we're now aware we have either subconsciously or consciously been poisoning ourselves with food, alcohol, you name it, then I'm saying 90% is probably the role of the subconscious, the role of the belief, and the role of the mind. What I've seen in my work, 36 years in the medical industrial complex, home health, hospice, when the patient makes the decision to heal, then it's a different story. Not they hope this works and they have faith in that modality, but it's they know the sky is blue and they're going to heal.
So let me ask you this. Would you say that that is the biggest role in knowing when someone is truly ready to transform?
Absolutely. And you can hear them, I would say, within the first 15 minutes of working with someone, they tell me whether they're going to get better or not. So a lot of clients will say, well, I'm treatment resistant. So they're basically saying, like, I'm not going to change. I just want to do one more thing to appease everyone around me or myself to say,
Right.
well, look, at least I'm going to therapy or I'm seeing a coach or I'm changing my diet, but they don't want to heal because they're getting like a secondary gain, they're getting attention from their family or something else is feeding the illness that they are enjoying secretly. Like they're not gonna ever come out and say, yeah, I love my cancer, but I have had many, many, many patients that don't want to get better because they are revered in their family for the first time. They're seen in their family for the first time. They're loved in their family for the first time.
You think sometimes that I've seen this, but I would like you just to kind of emphasize this a bit because obviously you've had experience with this. Those people that have treatment resistant, you think there's a lot of times the need to check out, like they're wanting to check out?
Yeah, I think well, what I see playing out is simply they love their drugs more than the idea of going through the period, where you have to get off the drugs and go through the detox period. It's
Okay, so they love their drugs. Why do you think that is?
they're able to numb themselves from their life. So they don't want to face the reality of where they are. And we use various coping mechanisms to stay away from the reality. I mean, I did it with my son. My son was severely vaccine injured. I didn't want to face it.
Hmm.
So I ran from it. I stayed incredibly busy. I looked really productive to the outside world. Look at all this stuff I'm doing, but it was because I didn't want to sit down and look at what was happening and face, the world of a diagnosis or face anything like that. So it's a couple glasses of wine every night and big old cup of coffee in the morning, and then just extreme busyness. So that kept me from facing what I didn't want to face. And then when I did finally face it, it was about 2 years of just deep regret and not enjoyable.
Yeah.
So it's not a small feat to say, it's time to face reality. It's I would never tell somebody they need to do that. I mean, it's definitely better over here now that I've gone through it. I never would want to go through that again. It's it's not for the faint of heart. And so, when we're talking about healing, most people want to know, how can I still take my poison and get better? And that's the questions that they'll ask. And so I'm right there. I know they don't want to work with me. They need someone to enable them and to continue on and saying, yes, benzodiazepines aren't that harmful. And yeah, you can drink a little bit of alcohol with them. I actually have doctors that tell patients that. So
Right. So we know doctors are a big cause of I mean, obviously the third leading cause of death is our current healthcare system. And I would even argue that one that's even more dangerous than that is not analyzed enough, looked at, monitored, and evaluated is the mixture of medications. Taking a
yeah.
tremendous amount of different medications at once, I think is probably that would be, I would say, the reigning king, you know.
Yeah, and one of the factors that we don't look at with taking all of those different drugs is they hijack the different pathways in the liver, which break down your nutrients. And so if you're hijacked with drugs, you're not breaking down the nutrients in the food you're eating. So even if you are eating grass-fed, finished, pasture-raised, biodynamically grown, you're not going to be able to process those nutrients because your drugs have taken over. And I'm including vitamins and supplements that are made with chemicals in that category.
Yeah. I would even argue that the supplements aren't even doing any good on a energetic level too, because they're um, like you said, they're many times people are saying that, well, I'm taking the vitamin C, I'm taking this, but they are not they're not in resonance with anything um to even get any kind of benefits from that, providing that the supplements they are taking are not even synthetic, which most of them
Right.
are.
Well, and there's not even such thing as a vitamin. That was a construct invented by the pharmaceutical company to sell back chemicals and fortify food so that you have to buy their chemical concoction. So there's no vitamin C per se in a lemon. It's the lemon that they can never recreate. Nobody could recreate a lemon, but they pick one compound out of hundreds of thousands, make a chemical copy and say, there you go, that's your vitamin C, that's your ascorbic acid. You look at the scurvy studies with the sailors, it was all absolute garbage studies. The same when you get into virology and you start to look at how did they ever prove there was a virus? Well, they didn't. You know, they
Right.
used a bunch of goo and calf, bovine calf serum and all these crazy things, and they didn't have a control. The same with vitamins. They just made it up. They pick out these chemicals. They say, oh, if you didn't get the vitamin C, the active ingredient of a lemon or a lime, then you could get these deficiency diseases, those are all made up as well.
Right. So it again, it's not like we're talking about vitamin C and lemons, but the same thing can be said for like broccoli and sulforaphane. Like you could find supplements that say broccoli in a pill form
Right.
and it's sulforaphane, but there's something about the the entire product itself that gives it its benefit whenever an organism eats it, and not just that isolated active ingredient, the reductionist model that we tend to
Right.
we definitely do in the Western world.
Well, you're talking about a plant's synergy, and then you're talking about like what you mentioned earlier, what are the combinations with all of these different drugs? Well, with the just eating a piece of fresh broccoli from the garden, you have the synergy, the food matrix of that plant. Hundreds of thousands of inputs, millions to grow the broccoli, the sunlight, the moonlight, the starlight, the birds, the bees buzzing around, the pollinators, everything that went into that, the water that went up through the roots into the broccoli, that's the medicine. You can't take it, dry it, grind it up, put it in a tiny pill and say, here's your medicine. I think that's why functional medicine, I believe Rockefeller was so clever in, taking both sides. You have to take a pill to stay healthy. They don't care what pill you take. It's just as long as you're used to taking a pill, knowing you need an outside factor to stay healthy.
So you think so Rockefeller and functional medicine are related almost like pharmaceuticals are?
100%. So if you didn't want the wolf, what medicine that they tell you is poison right
Which
on
would be the pharmaceuticals, right?
the
Yeah,
pharmaceuticals, the surgery.
petroleum based. Okay.
Right. If you didn't want to take the wolf, then you can take the wolf in sheep's clothing, and that would be the vitamins and supplements. And if you look at how pharmaceuticals are made versus vitamins and supplements, there is absolutely no difference.
What about since we're talking about this and this is one thing that made me really you got my attention with this and I agreed with you. Let's talk about these heavy metal detoxes and parasite cleanses and things like that. But what about those? Aren't they beneficial?
No. So, and I've written a 3-part series on parasites, and I went in with confirmation bias. I expected there to be the good parasites that are beneficial, and I was going to shock everyone that, yep, there's actually some good parasites. And then the bad ones. Turns out they're all beneficial. It's if I want to kill parasites inside my body, it's the same thing if I go out today and shoot the garbage man for picking up my trash. And then I'm confused as to why I have trash piling up in my
Right.
house. So it's the same concept. If you have parasites, like Dr. Lee Merritt tells you that you have cancer because you have parasites. Well, the parasites are at the site of the tumor consuming the tumor. They are taking out your garbage intact, those little guys
And
are going to be
there's not to interrupt you. There's other people that say that the same thing about cancer is fungus related. Okay,
right,
so
right. Yeah,
but
everybody has
please
their
continue.
idea.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
please continue.
and I would go so far as to say, what are we really talking about when we're talking about cancer? Because that's a whole nother can of worms. The way they diagnose a virus, the way they diagnose prostate cancer. So anyway, we we can put that on the shelf for later. But when we're talking about parasites, it's the environment that you are creating. So if I use toothpaste with detergents, I'm going to wear away my biofilm. If I continue to do that and drink alcohol and drink acidic foods that wear away my mucosal lining from my mouth to my tail, the parasites can attach. Now I'm weakened, I'm vulnerable. If I'm eating matrix foods, frankenfoods that's not digesting in my stomach, I'm going to have undigested foods in the intestines that will draw parasites to take it out. If I have necrotic tissue, dead tissue somewhere in my body, parasites are going to go there and remove it. That's all they're there. They can't eat healthy tissue. They're not going to sit there in your liver and eat your healthy liver.
So what do you think of and I have my input on this. I agree. But what do you think about the functional medicine doctors that are pushing parasites cleanses for nearly everything?
I think they're the exact same as Fauci. There's no difference. Fauci was trying to get you to take the injection. They're trying to get you to take wormwood or worse, ivermectin or, any of these other cleanses or the same to get out heavy metals. You can't poison the body back to health, but they want you to do DMSA and EDTA, two of the most toxic substances that you can consume. They melt your bones, but you got to get the metals out. Your body doesn't hang on to things it doesn't want. It's not stupid. It doesn't have this, this idea that if you don't take something, take a pill, get an infusion from a doctor, from a translator, that you'll hang on to it for the rest of your life and your dementia and Alzheimer's and all these or deficiency diseases. So it's the same approach as allopathic medicine. Functional medicine uses the same scare tactics. I had one woman who went to a functional medicine doctor and he told her, if you don't take vitamin D3, you will lose all your hair.
Have you heard other scare tactics? I'm just curious.
I've
From
heard
the
a
functional.
lot. Yeah, I've heard a
Okay.
lot of scare tactics, especially with parasites. They can hijack your brain and puppet you around to eat and drink things that the parasite wants, not what you need. So you're basically a meat suit for parasites. They can destroy your gut flora. They are the cause of cancer. So unless you're killing parasites with industrial insecticides, you're going to get cancer, when the opposite is true.
And what is that opposite?
So the opposite, if you're killing parasites on a regular basis, the garbage men, that little speck of garbage that was lodged in your intestine might become a polyp, or it might become a tumor if you're really just ignoring it and you're eating and consuming toxins on a regular basis, which most of us are. I mean, I bought some organic rice for my son and made him a soup, and it melted down to nothing. I don't know what it was. So the organic food that we're buying, it's toxic, and it's like we can't escape it.
Right.
But if we're under the understanding that our bodies are extremely resilient, we're miraculously designed to be adaptable to our environment, as long as we don't add to the poison and get rid of or interfere with our body's natural mechanisms to protect us. So the way they get us to interfere with it in the functional community is the alcohol-based tinctures. It's the healthy soaps. It's the zeolite and the methylene blue and the chlorine dioxide. Like all of these will destroy our body's natural defense systems. The natural soaps, the essential oils.
So you think there's any benefit to things like essential oils?
If you find someone that actually makes them themselves, absolutely. I 100%. Most of the oils that you'll find are chemical copies, synthetic signatures. doTERRA got in big trouble with a court of law because Young Living, who they partnered off from, sued them for stealing their trade secrets. And in the court, they revealed their trade secrets where they used synthetic oils.
And that's doTERRA that did? Hmm.
doTERRA. So Young Living sued doTERRA for stealing their trade secrets, and both of them were using synthetic oils. And then they dropped the case because they probably thought, well, this doesn't look good for either one of us.
Hmm.
It takes a
Yeah, I mean,
lot of all I did was look at to start this whole concept was how much lavender is grown on the planet, how much lavender is needed to make the essential oils, how many essential oils are sold annually. It doesn't
they're
add
good
up. Like,
questions. These are
yeah,
good questions to ask.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's where I function. I don't take the medical industrial complexes, pharmaceutical funded studies that come out of universities to get my information. I look at reality. Let's just see, is there enough lavender on the planet to make the essential oils that they're making? Absolutely not even close.
Wow. I tell you what, it's good to have you asking those kind of questions. I highly respect that. I'm aligned with that kind of detective work rather than just kind of going with the status quo. Um,
Right.
I, I I tend to ask those questions and have for decades on people that I see that are sick when others are not. I know of a family right now. Get this, I know of a family right now who um, completely not vaccinated, homeschooled, raised on a natural environment where they had like a ranch where they had cows. They slaughtered their cows were slaughtered and they ate their grass-fed cows. And you would think for all practical purposes, this family is healthier than your average American family
Mhm.
on the standard American diet. But the oldest of this family, the oldest kid is, I think he's 17, and he's already showing signs of ALS.
Mm.
He's already showing signs of paralysis, um, dropping things, numbness in the legs and everything else. And it has nothing to do with the toxins in his environment because his folks are aware of it, but it has to do with the repression of emotions in that family because we know them very well. They're family with
Um,
us. Okay. Um, and they have 8 kids, and one of them even, has pulled her own eyebrows out, one of the children. And
wow.
it's so my take at this is because I've went over there and I was eating with him once, and the dad was slicing up beef liver, and he goes, "There's nothing healthier than beef liver," and he was eating it. And I'm sitting here, honestly, Robin, I'm sitting here going like this. Well, damn, I just fed my kids Freddy's frozen custard on the way here. If we stopped at
Yeah.
we drove and we stopped and ate there, um, convenience and all that. And my kids don't have any kind of expression of those illnesses. So I want to kind of go back a bit to what you were talking about with no matter how exposed we are to a certain toxin. And what was the toxin you were talking about? Cyanide, perhaps, something like that. Um,
Let's just say, yeah, a known
a
toxin that
known toxin, right?
affects everybody
Yeah.
similarly.
No matter how much we're exposed to that, um, eventually it'll give in. Uh, this is something that I have been well aware of this kind of concept. And what I believe, what I've seen clinically and what I've witnessed in literature all kinds of different literature is a person's mindset on what they believe can definitely impact their tolerance to those kind of things. So much to the point where there's even literature where there's people that are uh, very, very, uh, they're very ingrained in, I think, Southern Baptist churches, and they feel intoxicated almost by God, so much to the point where they're enduring snake bites and things like that. And even, and I do know this, that they even drank strychnine, and there were
Right.
scientists there, and they went and like swabbed it, sent it into a lab to see if it was verifiable, and it was real. And these people were okay. So I think that subconscious mind has a tremendous amount of power, and the way you're describing the durability we have, the the ability to be resilient to things. I think it has to do with the mindset we believe on that deeper level. And because I know of people that have detoxed, and I understand the supplements. That's why I'll just be honest. We went from making in the functional medicine world, we went from making, $300,000 a year on just supplements to less than $500 a year. Willingly,
Mm.
we changed by the recommendations we do with our clients. We were all in the we were all in the functional medicine world. Take a detox, do this, take a parasite cleanse for everything. Oh, you're going to need one next month. You're going to need one every full moon. You're going to need one here. You're going to need one there. Um,
Um,
Filling all these gaps, taking the nutrients for the thyroid, everything else. And I started to realize it had so much to do with mindset, that once I could get their brain out of threat response, once I could teach them,
mhm.
hey, if you got an ongoing symptom, I don't care if it's thyroid, knee pain, chronic headaches, back pain, shoulder pain, whatever it is, if you have chronic symptoms, it's because your brain is perceiving danger in some way, shape, or form. No, it can be a relationship. It could be the narcissistic ex ex-wife or
Mhm.
ex-husband. It could be your boss at work. It could be a number of things. It could also be the research you're doing. My last patient was
Yeah.
like, I had to get up in the night, and I decided to go ahead and do some research, and man, I didn't go back to sleep. And I'm like, oh, your brain was on full out threat response. I
Yeah.
found if we can get their brain into a state of safety, then all that supplementation isn't
Yeah.
necessary at all.
And what I'll go back to is that's 90% of it. And having that, like Bruce Lipton talks about that strychnine study with,
Uh-huh.
the Baptists, and some of them do die.
Serpents of fire. Yeah, right.
Some of
Uh-huh.
them do die, and then some of them don't. Or like Wim Hof, he can change the temperature of his blood, allegedly. I tend to be skeptical of everything that I'm seeing on a screen, but let's say he can. Let's say you really can go past being bitten by a rattlesnake, or, black mamba or strychnine. What it comes down to then is your knowing.
Knowing, right.
Belief can be manipulated. Manipulation by the propaganda machine, the powers that be, the authority, the parents, everything. And that's what they work on that level. But if you know something, you don't have to do mantras every morning. You don't have to meditate on it. I don't need to meditate that I'm going to see the sun tomorrow morning. Like the sun's going to come up. And if I don't meditate, it's not going to happen. I don't believe it. That's why I keep having to try and remind myself. But if we get into that state of knowing, that's different. That's what I mean when my patients make that turnaround. They know they're going to get better. Very rarely does that happen, but you can see it. And it doesn't matter what the treatment. They can go full medical industrial complex and get the radiation and the chemo. I have one woman living today that went the chemo radiation route with her lung cancer, and she's totally fine because she knew it. She knew it was going to work. She knew she's going to get better. She doesn't have time for this. Let's go. We look at the study of the nuns that had dementia. They looked at the amount of plaques post-mortem. They all had the identical amount of plaques, but only 50% showed the signs of dementia, severe dementia. And it was the ones that didn't had a positive attitude. The other ones were, Eeyore bringing the rain cloud everywhere they went. And then we get into fear and anger. Those are the
Yeah.
two most deadly emotions to your psyche, especially long term. And that's what, watching these screens night after night, researching. Researching isn't watching somebody else tell you something that they read. Researching is, watching your observable environment, asking questions, critically thinking through it, and then doing, look up market analysis on, did ivermectin blow up after COVID? Yes, it did. They had a tenfold increase in revenue, and then it went to 100-fold. Like, they're making a lot of money off that. So then you got to question what's behind this narrative, and who's making the money? Why do we have a vitamin D lobbyist? Because it's $1 billion empire. And then
I'm sorry, Robbin, you cut out for just a moment. Why do we have a vitamin what?
Why do we have a vitamin D lobbyist?
Okay.
Why do we have, lobbyists in Washington for specific vitamins? Because it's a $1 billion empire.
Right.
So that's where I look at. And then you're right. This family that you have, you can go through it with a fine-tooth comb and realize, he has a myelination that's been worn away. How do you demyelinate the body? Fear and anger.
Right. Now, let's talk about that for a moment. Is it the fear and anger? Is it the fear and anger, or is it something else related to that, like perhaps the repression of it, or the holding on to it that makes it more dangerous?
My feeling is, and why I try to get people toxin free so they can actually hear the divine from within and be in a state of homeostasis. And I believe once you're in homeostasis, you're not going to engage in any type of behavior that's going to destroy your body. Animals don't do it in the wild. They're not neurotic. They don't need Prozac like our dogs at home do, because people leave them at home by themselves for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day, So what else is going on? Are they forcing their kids to eat this diet because they're in a state of fear that if you don't eat it, if you go and get an ice cream, it's going to destroy your life and wind you up sick, weak, dependent?
Right.
What's ongoing in their minds? And, the other way they get these vitamins and supplements into us is through cattle. Are they injecting their cattle before slaughter with vitamin D3 to make the meat more tender? It's a common practice. Almost everyone does it. Are they giving their cattle a premix of vitamins and supplements that go directly into the meat and into the fat? We get this idea what healthy is, but is it really? And that's why I say when you're in homeostasis, you can't get tricked anymore.
So homeostasis, talk a little bit about what that is and about what that is. And I want to kind of ask about what role does like spirituality play in that?
Well, I think that's a huge part of it, because you can't be in homeostasis unless everything is functioning in tandem, in unison, in its balance. So your spirituality is in balance, your mind, your body, the heart, the soul, everything is hearing each other, listening, reacting, and moving you then through life in that sense of homeostasis. And I believe once you're in that, you're untouchable. You're bulletproof, unless you get hit between the eyes with a bullet. But other than that, we're talking about you have the sebum layer in your hair. So you have the antenna. You have the sebum layer on your skin acting as a one-way valve. Toxins can go out, They can't come back in.
You're talking about just a natural sebaceous,
The boy that the
the
body
oil,
only
yeah,
knows.
that the body
Yeah.
produces naturally, right?
Yes. Yep, exactly. And that we just see it as, okay, well, that's our skin's natural skin's oil, whatever. We need to wash it off and it'll just replenish. And that's not exactly true. It's a electromagnetic conductor. Same with our hair. You know, like we're like your friend's son, I feel horrible with ALS. He's demyelinating his electrical system on the inside, but we do it on the outside. And when we do that, we're left and more susceptible. So if I put soap in my mouth, I'm more susceptible to an overgrowth of parasites or yeast or whatever. And then the functional can say, aha, that's the problem. Just like allopathic is like, aha, it's the bacteria that's the problem. Let's kill the bacteria. Let's kill the parasites. It's just the same idea, the same approach that's leaving you worse than when you started.
Okay. So can you give an example of somebody that had like an issue that you know of that had a physical issue, and kind of tell a little bit about what happened, how they resolved it, um, by resolving emotional, energetic blocks, whatever may have happened to get them in homeostasis?
So my favorite example that I've mentioned before, I think you'll like this one. He was a World War II vet. And when I met him for the first time, he was in a boarding care home in California. And boarding care homes, if you've never been in one, are horrible places.
Mm,
There's usually, a patient or two screaming nonstop or repeating the same word over and over, like help, 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 all night long. And so I met him in this boarding
oh,
care
that sounds
home.
terrible.
Oh, they're horrible. And it smells, and the people that are running it are there just to make money, and so they pack the rooms, 2 or 3 people in the room, and it's just a single family home that they have like probably 15 people in. So I met him there, this big guy, 6'5", and face was extremely flushed. His legs had so much edema he couldn't walk. They looked like tree trunks. And so he was one of the few. When I said, "Do you want to change?" He said, "Absolutely, I will." He said, "I will do anything." I said, "Well, it's going to be emotional, spiritual, and physical." So we had him change his diet, which he did that day. He called his family. They came in. They brought him all this food. They called it the Robbin diet. And then we talked about. I said, "You're
Which consisted of what, if you don't mind me asking? Just
I
cover
say
the
if it grew
basics.
out of the ground, fell out of a tree,
Okay.
or walked around, you can eat it, get the best possible in-season fruits and vegetables. If you can get it at a farmer's market or grow it yourself, better. But that's the general parameters.
Okay.
You know, not anything in a package or Frankenfoods. And so he did about 80% of what I recommended. I
Okay.
would see him with, honey roasted peanuts, and it's like, well, have your fun. He did about 80% of that, but then he was still really inflamed. We got rid of the edema. We got him home, but he looked like a Christmas tree. And, we got him off most of his medications. There was only 2 or 3 left he was still taking, and it was untreated PTSD from World War II. He could really not even mention the word without getting flushed.
PTSD.
He couldn't mention World War II.
Ah, okay.
And he would get flushed and reactive. So he wasn't going to go see a psychiatrist.
Right.
But I had him do tapping. He took it to it like flies to buttermilk. He was doing the tapping 3 times a day, got rid of most of the inflammation just by doing that, connected more with his family, and was able to live at home. I saw him when he was 92 until he was 97, healthy, independent, and happy.
Wow. So the inflammation, would you say it was a lot of repressed anger?
I would say it was a lot of repressed sadness. When I looked at, he was a 6'5", big, tough guy, not allowed to share feelings or, what his experiences in World War II were. And he was a pretty smart guy, maybe realized it was all for naught anyway. You really have to, and with the tapping, or any of the other modalities, if he believes, has that understanding, that inner knowing is going to work, it's going to work. And it was just the matter of him now paying attention to himself. All right, now I'm going to get better. Whatever it takes, I'll keep doing things. If they don't work, we'll find something else. That's the approach. Flip me down, I'll come back up every single time. And that's when you can start to see true healing begin. And it's because they've taken that momentum, and now the momentum is carrying them to where they get into this homeostasis.
Okay. Excellent. So he started out by eating the Robbin diet, and 80% of getting foods that walked on the ground, fell from the tree, grown from the ground, and then he started releasing probably a lot of repressed emotions. And I'm going to say, if he was a vet and was around a lot of comrades and soldiers that died, there's always guilt with that too.
Right.
So it's not just sadness, but guilt and everything else. And he was able to start releasing those emotions and getting him to a state of homeostasis where he started to live a much better life between 92 and 97. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not over till it's over. Most people would see 92, legs like tree
Sure.
trunks, can't even walk.
Sure.
Forget it. Like, let the guy have his ice cream and his Twinkies and everything else that he liked. And that's not how I operate. Because when we're talking about it, when you're in homeostasis, you could eat a Twinkie and be fine. Because you're not going to eat anything that's going to poison your body. That's what I mean. Like, your spirit's in alignment. You're not eating too much food because you're trying to salve a wound, an emotional wound.
Right.
Or you're not going to go and get drunk trying to numb feelings.
I see. Yeah. So it's safe to say, and we might have different terms for this, but whenever you're in homeostasis, you're going to be more divinely guided, more spiritually guided hey, if you're going to have I want to say a treat, like a Twinkie or some ice cream, you're doing it in a way to where it's pleasurable for you, but you're not trying to numb something out. Okay.
Exactly.
I completely agree with that. And that's one thing that I teach people. I did a podcast with a gentleman a while back who was also a self-sabotage coach, right? And a great conversation, great gentleman, great guy. And when I was talking with him, he has himself made tremendous journeys, tremendous progress in his own life, becoming more divinely guided, spiritually guided, uh, changed a lot, improved a lot of his life, but he still partakes in going and meeting old friends once a year. And because of his coaching, his training, he said this statement: I choose to poison myself, once in a while with my friends. And I said, look, we got to direct it. Let's be direct with each other on that.
Yeah.
I said this, I go, true or false? When it's time through the year, you go once a year to go meet with your old friends. You guys all get together, you stay in a cabin for a couple of, maybe a weekend or something, and it's the boys catching up on old times, right? And I said, true or false? When the time is approaching, do you feel like your spirit deep down is telling you, no, don't do this? Or is it saying, it's time to have fun with my buddies. It's time to have some fun and reconnect with my old friends. And he goes, Gabe, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's actually telling me that I need to connect with them, that I need to have some bro time, that it's healthy to do this. And I said, so if you have a few beers and you have a little bit of smoking weed, whatever else it is, true or false? When that's happening, your spirit gnawing at you, is it saying to yourself, oh my God, I just blew everything, I'm a total reject, blah, blah, blah? Or Are you sitting there for a moment? Because whenever you have a beer or two, or a little smoke of a weed, is your spirit sitting here telling you, looking at your friends? Because what happens is it opens you up a bit,
Yeah.
especially if you do it once a year. It removes that filter of the ego for a moment,
Yeah.
and it allows the underlying subconscious to kind of surface. And I said, is it telling you what a schmuck you are and how much of a bad choice this was to come out with your buddies, or is it kind of telling you, wow, you've changed a lot. You're here with the buddies, you're having
Yeah.
a good time, and man, you've grown. Some of them have grown, some of them have not, but I've grown a lot. I'm here having a good time with them, and I feel good about things. And he goes, man, you really nailed this on the head. I feel good about it. I said, do you feel good going home whenever the trip's over? Do you feel good going home, or do you feel like you just blew everything you've ever done? And he goes, no, I feel great. And I said, then for God's sake, stop telling yourself I choose to poison myself. What you should do is say, I choose to partake in having fun with my friends. And
Exactly.
and because there's a difference between a once a year meeting with friends that talk about the old times, have a good time. He's successful in his business. He's doing what he loves to do on his home life, got a happy relationship with his wife, his kids. And I said, that's the stuff that counts. Don't beat yourself up. And now, if you were doing this every single weekend and your business went to crap and you had been divorced multiple times, that's when it's probably a little different um, circumstance. But I was saying, don't ever actively tell yourself, I choose to poison myself, because your brain is assigning meaning to everything you give it
That's right.
on a huge level. And it was that information was very welcome to him, you know.
Well, that's a brilliant point because we can get so far on the other side. And when I teach my classes, there's invariably some people that are like, oh my God, you know, texting me at all hours of the day and night. Like, is this laundry soap okay? And is this dishwasher soap okay? And it's like they want to systematize it the same way they were in the Matrix. And
Yeah,
that's not about waking up. So you're divinely guided. You will know in an empowered place, heck, I can have a glass of champagne at this wedding and enjoy the heck out of it, but not attached to it. Like, oh, that was amazing. I want to
yep,
recreate it. I want that feeling again. So I'm going to drink the feeling
right.
or, chase it. I'm chasing that dragon again when it's just in that moment you're guided. And no, like the experiment with Rat Park.
Yeah.
They got the
The
rats addicted to
cocaine, I think, in
cocaine,
yeah,
and they had cocaine, and I think the other one they had morphine. So they got them addicted to it. And when they just had a little tank and a wheel, they loved their cocaine water or their morphine. When they were in Rat Park, we had everything a rat desires. None of them chose the cocaine or the morphine.
right.
And
The
that's the same.
community.
Yeah. It's the same with us though. You look around and I think this is a huge problem with the sabotage coaching and you know everyone then feels like they need to be perfect.
Mm,
And it's like, oh, now I'm poisoning myself, and I'm just this absolute, failure because I had a weekend with my buddies and smoked a little grass and drank some beers. And then that can do the opposite then. Now you're, oh my God, why am I still sabotaging myself? What's wrong with me? Might as well just,
right.
drink
And
and smoke.
let me ask you, because I've seen multiple people uh, that have been coached that way and beat themselves up relentlessly, even if they're on the path of growth
Yeah.
and they're on the path of improvement and everything else. And I will say this, that they're being guided divinely. They're letting their spirit kind of show them the way. Um, have you witnessed people that really get into that cycle of guilt, beating themselves up because they're they're
Yeah.
they're they're shooting for perfectionism, and
Yeah.
they're judging themselves
Yeah.
harshly?
I have a lot of them on my Telegram channel that felt that exactly what you're describing and actually made the problem worse because you're shooting for perfection and then you fail So now you're even more of a failure and you know the truth about the substance. That's even worse.
Oh,
Before it was,
yeah.
well, a couple drinks a week, no big deal, or a cup of coffee. Oh, well, you thought it was an antioxidant. It was your medicine. But now that now you're treating it like a poison, like the strychnine. It's like now it's even worse. And so now
Yeah.
you're even in, even more of a death loop. And then it's the mind. Now you're 90% programming yourself like, I'm poisoning myself, I'm poisoning myself, I'm poisoning myself. This is poison. It's exemplified the problem, which is why I really distanced myself from the community. I was actually going to become a certified self-sabotage coach. I had everything that I needed, and I didn't turn in my last two videos because I didn't want to be associated with it. I had a high concern for all of the information that they were collecting from my clients.
Yeah.
That is creepy that it does that. I think I told you last time I was going to
You're
turn
right.
it
You're
off,
like, what is this?
but I
Yeah.
didn't.
There it goes. Yeah. It is. I mean, look at the way that is.
I don't know if there's other ones. Um, but
No, I agree.
when you look at the questionnaire that they have for everyone that wants to be your coach or coach with you, it's asking some very bizarre questions. It's about a 2-hour questionnaire that takes to fill out. And so I deleted everybody's information and just kind of distanced myself from it because, like you said, we're not here to make people worse or to
Right.
beat yourself up. That is the ruling class. That's what they get us to do. Fight each
Yeah.
other and fight within ourselves. I hate
Right.
myself. Oh my God, what am I doing this for again? I'll never amount to anything. It's like all those things that it then become the repetitive
Right. And
content, fear, anger, self-loathing, and then that is an excellent way to demyelinate yourself, even if you're eating a perfect diet.
right. And I think a lot of that underlies this. This is what I noticed, and this is why I had to distance myself from that group was the brain and threat response. It's like there's always a threat of this, of that, of this, of that. Everything's wrong. Um, and I know of people that have I've worked with, and I will say this, at least 25% of my work is teaching people how to undo the nocebo effect. And that's from all areas, including coaches, including doctors, including their own research, including family and peers and everyone else have told them something. And we're familiar with how the placebo works, right? You give somebody something innate, like a sugar pill, and the sugar pill is given to them with a positive expectation along with it. They believe it. They set in and they believe it or they know it, whatever. They fully have an understanding that this thing is going to improve my life, and therefore there's noticeable biochemistry changes, like even molecular shifting changes of molecule shapes that they've looked at and studied with placebo effects. Even people that have had sham surgeries do really well, right? So that's the effect of placebo. The nocebo is giving something with a negative expectation behind it. And I will say that that is a majority of um, all at least 25% of my work is showing people a nocebo effect, and their brain assigns meaning to things,
Right.
good or bad, and they have ineptly, unintentionally turned their brain into a full out threat response from everything going on. I'll even say this, Robin, this may surprise you. In the last 2 months, I've asked 50 people at least, maybe more. Tell me your take on nutrition. Whenever I say the word nutrition, tell me your first gut response. What happens? How do you feel? Just that's all I want to know. I don't want interpretation. I don't want a
Yeah.
story. When I say the word nutrition, how does it make you feel? And 50 people more go. They do this little micro expression of, oh, discontent when I say the word nutrition.
Hmm.
And you know why the hell that is? Because they are so convinced they're doing something wrong. They're so convinced that even, like you said, even the organic food's wrong. Even this is wrong. Nothing's organic anymore. I mean, the geoengineering sprayed, I mean, you are not going to escape that. You may live in a house
Yeah.
that's got a good filter system, but what are you staying there forever? You can't even walk amongst the trees anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, they're convinced that everything they do is bad, and they convince themselves that they're never doing good enough. They're never doing good enough when it comes to that. And they've been, and that's just using the word nutrition. It scares the heck
Right.
out of people. So, uh, like
But
I said,
look at how they've adulterated us. The Matrix, sure, there's your poison food, nobody cares. But on the other side, now it's, it's not biodynamics, not regenerative. The soils are depleted. It's just all this parroting that they're
yeah,
doing because they're addicted to that dopamine response that everybody got addicted to when, 2020 happened. And it was, like, oh my God, then this is happening. The sky is falling. And then when you realize, hey, this has been going on. Sorry, my dog is, sorry about that.
not a problem. No,
Um,
I agree what you were talking about, the way they have ultimately successfully made anxiety the largest growing condition in North America today by far. And I think that uh, a lot of, like you said earlier, not just certain groups of coaching, but also the functional medicine. I've looked at literature, and I shared this in my recent live event, that scared some, it didn't scare, but it brought an awareness to them that they had never even thought about. That I look at literature, and Ivan Ilitich wrote in 1979 that giving doctors of authority with white coats, we talked about that. You wear a white coat, giving recommendations, diagnoses to people can actually make them um, become much, much worse, right?
Absolutely.
And and the functional medicine world has actually, there's literature on them now stating that the diagnoses that they give people are no different than the medical labels, like chronic yeast infection, parasites. In some ways, this is no different than a chiropractor saying you have degenerative disc disease or something like this, or a right short leg. And these things they have zero. And I'm a chiropractor, and it
Yeah.
almost sounds heretic for this profession, but I'll be the first to say it. You having a right short leg or a slouch posture has zero evidence of that causing pain. A lot of it is your brain and threat response. That I'd say a majority of it is your brain and threat response. And but there's been so many things that have, um, quite frankly, scared the heck out of people. And that fear never sits idle with a brain.
Right. And when you're in the state of fear or you have the chronic anxiety, you will look in your environment for the answers. And you've been programmed to find the answers in what they're telling you. Oh, it's the GMO mosquitoes. I don't think you can genetically modify a mosquito. But now you get bitten by a mosquito. I'm terrified. People are getting reactions to mosquito bites, or you look at tick bites. You could get Lyme's disease. Now, when I go and hike, this is how California loves to do it. They like to put, the labels, this causes cancer on your food.
Mm,
Well, now when you go hike, they have a big picture of all the different types of ticks, which is disgusting,
right.
and all the diseases that they cause. And at the bottom, this is a state park, county park. The testing site, so you can send in the tick if you got bitten by one and have it tested. These are for-profit testing sites.
Right.
So now I have it in my mind. Everybody, like you said, I was like, well, I've been bitten like 6 times by ticks. You're like, only 6? Well, then we should all have Lyme's disease if you
Yeah.
go out in nature. So the same scare tactics as the wolf. They do that in the wolves in sheep's clothing. Hey, we're just trying to protect you from the scary nature. And I do not believe at this point that anything in the natural world is harmful. Yes, of course, if you're going to be stupid and fight a bear, you're going to die. But when I mean we're in homeostasis, I'm not going to go eat a pile of minerals that contains arsenic. I'm going to eat wild, fresh vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to eat that's in harmony. Wild animals aren't, dead by piles of hemlock. They don't have to take courses on what's poisonous and what isn't. You're in that homeostasis, so then you're divinely guided, wildly guided, whatever you want to call it. You're back to being a wild human. You know when to get out of the sun because you're not wearing sunglasses and sunscreen, and it feels good to get out of the sun, or it feels good to lay in the sun, bare naked because you need it. And when
Right.
you don't need it, you go back in, and there's no check boxes and timers and everything else to tell you. It's just
An
like you
aura
just,
ring.
or the aura ring, exactly, or your fat bits or fit bits, whatever they call them.
Right. Right.
It's you're functioning as a wild human, the way you see wild Mustangs
Yeah.
in the herd functioning the way a herd functions, healthy.
Yeah. And along with those things you were just describing, I'll say this: being obsessed with trying to fix yourself is
Mm,
also a major contributor to the brain's sting and threat response. So the more you monitor all those things, the more your brain is
mm,
convinced that you're actually, and that's so, it sounds so counterintuitive, but one of the things that I've noticed is the more doctors a person sees,
mm,
the more specialists a person has been to, the more fear-based. Again, a lot of it's nocebo. And I've asked a room full of functional medicine doctors who did parasite cleanses. I said, who amongst you, I want you to raise your hand if you've ever given your patient a parasite cleanse. The hand that raised their hand. I said, who amongst you has ever given a parasite cleanse and said this to your patient? Hey, this is short term. You just got a little bug. Maybe you got something from a salad bar or something like this. You're not going to rely on this stuff forever. Your body knows what to do. Your body knows how to heal. This is just to get the balance back because there's been something that's been, overgrown inside of you. So this is a short-term thing. Your body's going to heal itself. Don't look at it like something's broke. Look at it like, hey, I'm just giving myself a natural way to
right.
balance myself. I said, who's ever said that? All the hands go down, you know? So it's almost like you said, uh, an allopathic approach into the natural
Yeah.
naturopathic functional medicine world.
But look at, you went from 300,000 annual sales in vitamins and supplements. You decided, when you wake up, when you know better, you do better. So you're not going to sell your
Right.
soul any longer. And, I'm sure
Good
you can
point.
see, your health dramatically improve, but they're not, you're going to be the heretic because you're messing with their bottom line. And so their allopathic approach to functional medicine is netting them a lot of money every year. That's another house, vacation house or a
Yeah,
boat
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever it is. So it's like, yeah, it's just a little bit of poison, and you kind of justify that, and then you kind of justify the hey, you've got parasites, danger. You got to
yeah.
get rid of them. Oh my God, they're back. What are you doing wrong? That's the other allopathic approach. You are not having a normal reaction to a medication. You are allergic to it. There's something wrong with you. You're not having
Mm,
a normal reaction to a poison. Something's wrong with you.
right.
So you have allergies. So we got to treat your allergies now with drugs. And same in the functional. Something's wrong with you. Why do you have so much yeast? Why do you have so much of,
Got leaky gut.
right? Yeah, all of
So,
it. And it's always the approach to point the finger at you. So now you're going to self-loathe and self-hate and be in anger and fear, and sky is falling really yet once again. So then you become the organ recital to all your friends. Oh, I have this and I have that. And I'm seeing a functional medicine doctor, and I'm seeing a massage therapist and a lymphatic drainage and a Chinese medicine. Like And then you just become then the problem. And pharmakia, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical industrial complex did not change when Rockefeller came in. It started in satanic roots. It started in alchemy and giving you a spell cast, which is what a diagnosis is.
Right.
There's no such thing as a diagnosis. We don't have a computer that we plug ourselves into and say, you have this. There's no such thing as any of these diseases. It's a systematic poisoning of our body through emotional or physical roots or both that is creating downstream damage to the point that your body can no longer keep up, and then you start manifesting the direct effects of poisoning.
Yeah, that's Quimby wrote in 1847. He said, I saw a man with cancer. I told him that you got this lump. The man had never heard of that word before, was unbothered by it. He saw him in like 30 days and everything was completely healed, unbothered by the words because he'd
Yeah.
never heard it before. And from this, Quimby, who is kind of the one of the he's not probably the founder, but one of the contributing pioneers to what we would call psychosomatic medicine, mind body medicine. He said this in like 1800s. We would never have so many diseases if we didn't have so many names for them.
It's 100% true. And now the functional medicine community does the same thing. You're asymptomatic, but you have problems. Because I get this feedback all the time from people, and they'll say, well, how will I know when something's wrong if I don't go and give my blood and
Hmm.
get it tested? It's like, well, what does that look like to you when witches and warlocks and, satanic temples, they want your blood, they want your urine, they want your bodily fluids so they can cast spells on it. That's exactly the same thing that's happening when you give consent to having them look at your blood and find what's wrong with you. And we found through most all of the blood tests, they're a lie to sell you a drug that changes
Hmm.
a lab value, not you have this. And I,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to really dig deep into the markers for cancer and all of that, because it's another way to create that terror response. Prostate specific antigen test is a big hoax. So,
Mm.
we can see all of these ways that they do it. Functional medicine does the same thing. They want your blood and they want to tell you what's wrong with you so they can give you more drugs to heal you instead of what are the root causes? Let's address those and
Right.
let your body heal itself.
Right. That's one thing I've noticed in functional medicine, being a functional medicine doctor myself and advocating to them some of the things that need to change in some ways. And I was that heretic you talked about, right? Um, was doctors overall, whether it's naturopath, functional medicine, conventional, they're very uncomfortable with talking to people about their emotions, their vulnerabilities, their relationships, the things that really need
Mhm.
to, the things that are a major contributor to that. Um, they don't feel comfortable talking about that. And one of the biggest reasons I've noticed is because they themselves have not looked at their own traumas,
Right.
their own emotional turmoils, things like that. So
Well, how perfect for the coaching, because when you're a coach, you're supposed to be invincible. You figured everything out, so now you can coach other people, which is just another train wreck. Nobody has it figured out. Nobody has the answers. Nobody's above anyone else. That's the first thing I say in my class. If you ever start to put me on a pedestal, leave the class. I don't I don't have the answers. Here's what I've studied and here's what I've observed. Now let's talk about it so that we can, as, shoulder to shoulder, let's figure out like what is our human potential. So we don't have to keep talking about healing all the time and detoxing and, doing all these things. It's like, what do we talk about some exciting things? Like, what are we capable of if we are in our potential? Like, let's start to
so
look at that.
So let's kind of bring that up for a moment because that is out of the work that I've done, psychosomatic medicine, and I've come up with holographic deletion, holographic manipulation therapy, which is a way of accessing and working with our holographic memories and the constructs of memories, especially the ones between 0 to 5, and a lot of regression work. Like
Mhm.
my last client today, we regressed to a moment when she was 1 years old, and there was a significant um, emotional, uh, what's called, I can't even think of the work right now. It's a term that Bessel van der Kolk taught me, and it means they can't put a word to a certain overwhelming emotion, unable to verbally express it. There's a certain term with that, and I cannot believe I don't remember it right now because I'm always drilling my doctors to know this. But if you can't put a name to it, you can't process it. So we have other ways of immediately assigning something to it, a color, a smell, a vibration,
Oh,
something
okay.
like that. And then suddenly we can process it. And that was the case in her. Felt powerless, felt like she did something wrong and didn't know what. She was a 1 year old. And that's what our subconscious took us to. And then I asked a simple question: sense it. Don't tell me, don't think. Sense it. Have we reached the point that has everything to do with the feeling you want to change today? And she says no. And then
Mm.
boom, it goes right back to her mom as a child. So it just continues to go back, right? So this is the kind of work that I do, helping people get to the root of where their trauma started. But a big missing piece until recently that has been added and kind of forms the foundation is what we would call spiritual harmony, spiritual work. Um, what's your, tell me about that a little bit. Like,
I think that's all of it.
yeah,
You know,
okay.
if the spirit's awake and you've listened to your spirit, you've listened to the messages from your soul. Your soul is very quiet. And it's
Yeah,
easy to bulldoze over it and listen to the sky is falling, or that's what I heard, that's what I heard. You know, and the brain
right.
not hearing your soul. Your soul's messages are pure. They will never lead you astray. They're never going to trick you. And so, we know when I access and work with clients in spirit, it's what is your voice saying? Most of them don't know. What voice? Like the voice that's just counting and ticking off things. And um, it's really truly hearing your soul's voice and then acting on it, listening to that message and joining up with it. Like if you have a wild Mustang in your pen, you could break the horse.
Mm,
That's easy to do. Or you could inspire the horse to link up with you so that you are in tandem. That's the soul. That's working with your soul. If you keep ignoring your soul and numbing out, like, I don't want to hear that, I'm going to drink this, and it's going to stop talking.
for sure.
So this
Stops trusting you, basically.
stops trusting you. Exactly. You're going to break the horse. Well, this horse is broken. You know, that what's the point in that? You have a horse that you can lead around, but it's not in its natural spiritual element. And so when doing spirit work, it's listening to that voice, not my voice or what I've expressed, I think is important. But when you hear that inner voice, then you can follow that message and that gets stronger and the bond gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, exactly. Robin, your journey has been very powerful in this. I'm curious, and I'd like to hear for our listeners, what was a defining breaking point that you experienced in your life that has become a turning point for who you are today and what you do?
A defining breaking point. Well, there's been many, many breaking points. I think it was the one that really got me started on this trajectory was I had read this book by Martha Beck entitled Finding Your Way in a Wild New World. And blessing and a curse, but that book really opened me up that I was not living my soul's life.
Mm,
And I was in a toxic marriage with a alcoholic who was intent on turning me into an alcoholic and doing a, pretty darn good job of it. And I knew in that tight space, I'd never be able to change.
Right.
We had bought at this point 20 houses and we were renting them out and had built this beautiful home out in the county and had my son. And I knew it was going to be such a hard road to leave, but I knew I had to. I mean, I still, at times, I still think, man, I should have just stayed. Would have been so much easier than being a single mom and having, a vaccine injured son and doing all of this by myself. But it's my soul's path. And so that's, I think, what I really realized. Two things. One, no matter how many times you knocked me down, I'm going to get back up again. And two, your soul's path isn't easy. It's not like they tell you, you're going to manifest your dreams and have your dream life. It's a very circuitous route that creates a lot more challenges to know who you are. If you're just sitting there blissed out in a, $1 million home with a glass of wine every night, you don't know who you are. You have to be challenged. And so I decided I'm going to step into the ring of fire and see who I really am and do it my way. And so that really opened me up to trusting myself, because I knew when my son was born, he should not be vaccinated. And I told his dad that. I told the pediatrician, and they fought me so hard. And my son's dad said, if you don't get him vaccinated, I'll get a court order. It's going to happen. And so I watched my intuition, like beaten down so hard to force myself to do this, that I vowed never again to let that happen. And then the second time I poisoned my son was when I gave him vitamin D3 that Amanda Vollmer had recommended with the K2 in the lanolin, the really expensive stuff, and he broke a shoulder. And that's when I was like, that's when I truly woke up. That's when I said, okay, now I'm pissed. Now you've got all of me in this. And not to stay angry. I'm not angry, but I'm definitely motivated. And it's my duty to warn. I don't care if people think I'm crazy or if they still want to take it. It's like, just hear me out. And then I know I've told you that, hey, there's a rattlesnake up the hill ready to strike if you keep going out that trail. If you still go up the trail and get bitten by the snake, my hands are clean. Like, I don't know why you did it. It's not my problem. I told you. That's it. So that's why I do what I do.
What advice would you share with someone who feels called to follow their intuition?
I would say be really cautious at first to know that's your voice. There's a really distinct way, and I think I'm going to actually do a course on how to awaken your intuition and to really start to listen to your soul's voice, because we're so programmed up here that we think this is our voice. And, if you really want to go deep, you can look up Agent 131711 on Substack, and his recent 3-part series on how they manipulate your brain remotely. The experiments in the 40s, the 50s, they've clearly made a lot more advances, but that brain has been through propaganda and manipulation and programming to get out of that can be manipulated into the soul's voice that they cannot touch.
Right.
So that would be the way. Start with that. Start listening. And when you know. I hate that expression. I don't know why I said it, but it's like, you can't say or understand you've had an orgasm from reading a book, but when you've had one. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same thing. When you've heard that voice. Most of the time it's because it's not what you want to hear. I kept asking the question, I was in such deep turmoil when I was in my marriage, and, crying, and the victim medallion so heavy on my head. I'm like Frodo trying to walk up the mountain, like, please tell me the next step in my path, really dramatic. And it was stop drinking.
Yeah.
That was it. That was it. But I didn't want to hear that because that's my crutch. I'm numb. I don't want to face my reality. So let's go to South Africa and meet Martha Beck and have her fix me. That's what I'm going to do. And that's all that said. Just quit drinking. There was no judgment with it. There was no, you're a bad person because you're drinking. It's like, you're asking how you make your life better. Here's the only answer.
Right.
So, and then once I heard that voice, then it was like, okay, now I'm going to ask the question, put my hand on my heart, ask the next question. Usually I say, show me the next step in my path so I can walk my potential, be in service of the light, be in service of God, make it easy to understand. So easy to understand a toddler could understand it. So I don't have to look for signs and cues and clues. It's like, just tell me the next step.
Excellent. So let me ask you another question. How is there any kind of legacy that you're wanting to build through this kind of work? Like what kind of the world needs this kind of understanding, even if we're considered the outliers, the mavericks.
Yeah.
This is one thing. I have a lot of clients that come to me and we do this work, and they say, "Man, this isn't easy," but they know it resonates as truth.
Yeah.
They know it resonates as truth in a world that just doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And what kind of legacy are you building through your work?
That's a great question. And I had really wanted to touch on that when I was very young. I had an experience where I was connected. I think I told you on the last podcast, I met God
Mm,
when I was 3, wandered off from a campsite in the middle of nowhere and was gone 8 hours. Came walking back because I had been gone 10 minutes. But they, had sent out a search party, and I
right.
came wandering back in because I knew certain things. I was told certain things, just an understanding. And it was, I'm going to have to tell people what I see. And at the time, you couldn't have told me something that was more terrifying. I was so shy. I couldn't talk to adults. I I just wanted to disappear into nature and only talk to animals and plants and the mountains and the bedtime stories, and that's it. And so I was very disturbed by that. So I'm gonna have to be, somebody talking to groups of people. But the legacy I want is, it doesn't need to be a number of people, but just so that the idea moving forward, if I leave this planet better than I found it, with the understanding that we are powerful beyond measure, all of the answers are from within. Stop seeking the external. Look at how powerful you are. Look at your light, your brilliance, your wisdom. I mean, that's my dream, is to wake up to the point that we are so lit up that we can now have conversations where we're both awake, where we
Yeah.
both have this understanding of what our potential is.
Excellent. So how can people find you? What's the best way for people to um reach out to you, find your works?
The best, easiest way is just go to my website, purifywithin.com. Um, and on my website, there's a link to join my Telegram group. It's a private group by invitation only, where we actually talk about things like this. I mean, some people will still get in there and um, get mad at me for my views, but for the most part, it's people that are really awake and aware. And so we talk about, what is our potential?
Yeah.
What can we do now instead of arguing about, this conspiracy or that conspiracy, the Tartarians and everything else. It's like, how can we grow really nutritious food in our own backyards and share it with our neighbors, whatever their belief systems? How can we extricate ourselves from the matrix? How can we have, freedom
Right.
off grid while we're on grid?
Yeah. Well, Robin, this has been fantastic. I'm looking forward to our next meeting. We always have the best conversations.
Do
I do have another meeting I need to get to,
good.
but I am looking forward to reaching out and continuing this continuous conversation because people need
Yeah.
this work. Okay.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for having me on, Gabe.